Hi, and welcome to Camp Yarnsie. And today we have with us Wild Stitchers and owner Jen Lacy. So go ahead, Jen.
Hey everyone, I hope you guys are having a wonderful holiday weekend. I know I am, with a couple of extra days off of work. Well, one work anyway. I know it's been great here with Camp Yarnsie this weekend, so I want to thank them for having us again. And we keep coming back for more fun and games and excitement to show you all of our fun tools. So as you guys know, or you may not know, I am Jen Lacy, one of the owners of Wild Stitchers. Wild Stitchers is a handmade fiber arts tools business. We make tools for knitting, crocheting, yarn spinning, and a little bit of weaving stuff. Don't show that a whole lot often, but you'll be seeing that more often going forward. We've got a few new tools. We might demo a couple of them tonight. We might not. I know there's one for sure that I'll demo. But you know, just wanted to kind of carve out some time to show you guys how to use the tools that we sell, because, you know, it doesn't do any good if you're not sure exactly how to use them, or if you might have an idea but you're not overly confident with them, or, you know, maybe you don't even know what the tool is. And this is a great way to learn what the tools are, how to use them, and everything. So with that, I'm going to switch my camera views so you can see my workbench over there and get a closer view of these tools. And there we go. I'm going to move my mic over so you can hear me better when I'm over here. Okay, so hi everyone. We're now over here looking at this wonderful workbench that I have. And so to kind of start with some of the tools, I'm going to start with one that I enjoy the most. And the reason why I enjoy it the most is because I tend to make these the most. So it has to do with socks, and you're gonna see my project bag there. Since you can tell, these are on the needles, but obviously I'm knitting my socks 2 at a time. I do that because I get second sock syndrome, and I never knit the second sock if I'm only doing 1 at a time. But one thing that helped me the most with knitting socks is our heel to toe sock ruler. And this is a wonderful tool because you can use this to measure your socks as you knit them to make sure they're at the right size for when you need to start either your heels or your toes, depending on which way you knit your socks. So if you knit your socks toe up like I do, I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll pretend that I'm knitting my socks cuff down, and I'll show you how that works with cuff down socks as well. Cool thing about our heel to toe ruler is it does come unfinished. So if you have a certain size of socks that you knit repeatedly, like I knit socks for myself quite often and socks for my mom. And I know for myself, I need to knit to 7 1/4, between 7 1/4 and 7.5 inches before I start my heels when I'm doing toe up. And when I knit for my mom, I'm right around the same thing. I'm right around 7 1/4 for her socks. So what I can do is I can take a pencil or a pen or a Sharpie, and I can mark on here and put a line at 7 1/4 and write mom or write me or something like that. So I always know what size I need to go for the person that I'm knitting for. Now, of course, that works if you're knitting it repeatedly. You may not want to mark somebody on here that you're only knitting once or something like that, or like my kids whose sizes change all the time because they're growing massively, constantly. So you may not want to do that, but if you have ones that's unchanging, you're knitting a lot, why not mark it on there? That's a good thing this tool's for. Another great thing is if you flip it over on the back, we also have the Kitchener stitch put right on this ruler. So if you're doing cuff down socks and you need to Kitchener the toe, that Kitchener stitch is right there for you. You never have to look it up. Just find your ruler, or since you should have your ruler on hand for your socks, then you've got your Kitchener stitch. Now, how do you use these tools? Well, the easiest part, this is easy part about making socks, is measuring them. So you take the rounded 0 end of the ruler and you stick that into the toe of your sock. So this is for toe up. Stick that into the toe of your sock. Now straighten out your knitting. Don't stretch it. You don't want to stretch that. You just want to make sure that it's all the way into your sock. And then you straighten it out and you will see that I'm at about 4 inches. Yeah, about 4 inches on this sock. If I need to go to 7 1/4, that means I've got 3 1/4 more inches to knit, and that tells me. So when this line gets up to where you need to be, then you know it's time for me to start my heel. If I was at 7 1/4 right now, I would say, great, I get to start my heel, and I can put in whatever heel it is that I want to do for these socks. Whether it be a heel flap and turn, whether it be a short row, fish lips, kids heel, maybe it's an afterthought and I just need to put a string or a row of extra yarn in there just to have my point of where I want to put my afterthought. But at least I know that's where I need to do it. So then it just comes right out. You're good to go. You can keep knitting whatever it needs to be. Now, if this was a cuff down sock, we're going to pretend that we've got the cuff coming out here, and this is our heel cup that we have, and then this is the foot. We're knitting the foot. So this is the heel. We're knitting the foot. We need to know when to start the toe. Well, your pattern says, 1.5 inches from the length of your foot. So again, we know that to start the toe, it needs to be at 7 1/4 inches. So you put that ruler into the heel cup, and then we're going to pretend that up here's the leg of the sock. So you're putting that 0 into the ruler into the heel cup. You're straightening that out without stretching. And then you look at that measurement and see that, hey, it's still at 4 inches. Amazingly enough, I haven't knitted any more since I showed you on the other one. But because I'm doing 2 at a time, I don't need to measure both socks because I know that both socks are the same. This also helps greatly if you're not knitting your socks 2 at a time. This tool helps greatly because you can measure each one and you know exactly where you are, and you're not measuring them differently unless by chance you happen to stretch one or something like that. But we're not stretching, remember? We're just putting it on there nicely. You know that if you knit to each sock reaches the 7 1/4 line, you know they're going to be the same size, at least up until that turn, whether it be starting the toe or whether it be starting the heel. So it helps you make sure that you get your socks the same size if you don't knit them 2 at a time like I do. Or it just helps you measure them in general if you are knitting them 2 at a time or singly. So this is our heel to toe ruler. And you can find this and all of the other tools that I'm going to be showing you and demoing you today in our Etsy shop, which is etsy.com/shop/Wild Stitchers. So a heel to toe ruler for sock knitting. If you are a sock knitter, we also have sock blockers. Pretty self-explanatory as far as what they do. If we've got time, maybe I'll pull one out and show you guys that, but I want to show you the other tools first. So a tool that comes in very handy for knitting and spinning and crocheting is the wraps per inch guide. And this is a simple tool, but it's a very handy tool. The back of it's got our logo, so you can remember where you got it from. In the front of it tells you, you've got your notch here that's 1 inch wide. You've got your wraps gauge here, so you can tell how many wraps equals what weight of yarn. But wraps per inch guide is just that. It's a way to tell the gauge of your yarn, or not the gauge, the weight of your yarn for if you're spinning yarn and you want to know what weight you're spinning. Or maybe you have stash yarn and you're not quite sure what weight that stash yarn is. A wraps per inch guide can help you with that. Wraps per inch guide can also help you make sure that you have the same weight of yarn for substitutions. So if a pattern says that we're using a fingering weight, 14 wraps per inch, then you should be able to substitute that with any yarn that wraps at 14 wraps per inch. The way you use this tool, I'm going to pull some yarn out here. The way you use this tool is you're going to take and hold one end. I always hold it to the back. Hold it back here just because that's how I like to start it. And then you just wrap your yarn around this little gauge. And you want your, you want your yarn touching each other but not scrunched, and you don't want to pull your yarn tight. because you can see how this yarn is looking like this. If I pull this one tight, it actually looks smaller. So you don't want to pull it tight. You want to keep it loose, and you want to wrap it around. And just lay it side by side. Take out that one. Side by side, and fill up that entire inch. You don't need to leave your tail as long as I did. And it looks like I'm full there, but I see some gaps in between my wraps. So I'm going to kind of move it together, but not squish it. The whole thing is to have it close, but not have it squished. You don't want to change how that yarn looks in order to count it. So that's full. So if we count that, it might be a little too squished. So if we count, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I got 12, which this is a DK, kind of a lightweight DK yarn. So 11 or 12. See how I got a few of these a little squished together? That's probably why I'm getting 12 versus 11. But that's how you use a wraps per inch gauge. Is you literally just wrap within an inch slot here, and then you count how many you got, and that tells you your weight of yarn. So that's a fun tool. Again, helpful for spinners, knitters, crocheters, anybody, weavers. Weavers use wraps per inch gauges too when they're trying to figure, trying to warp their looms and stuff. They need to know their wraps per inch of the yarn so they can make sure that they're warping their looms right. I don't know a lot about knitting, I don't know a lot about weaving. So that one I'm not exactly sure how they use it, but I know that they use the wraps per inch for doing stuff with their warps and things. Another quick tool to show you is our swatch gauge. And this one here, I know Lindsay had this one out on Instagram, probably Facebook too, but our swatch gauge, most of us hate to swatch, but we know how necessary it is, especially when you're doing garments and things where size matters. This is a great gauge for not for making your swatches, but for counting your gauge. And the reason why it's so great is because we've got this 4-inch by 4-inch cross in the middle of it. And what that does is that really isolates 1 or 2 rows and columns of knitting to help you better count this. And I'm going to bring a little pedestal up here so we can get this closer to the camera. And I'm going to pull out my sweater that I'm working on. And we're going to show you how this swatch gauge tool works. So if we've got our sweater laid out here and we want to count the stitches and everything, if you're just looking at this, it's your eyes can get confused. And if you're like me, you're counting along and all of a sudden you realize you're counting up and down and everything. With a swatch gauge, you put this on here and you line it up. So there's 1 row in the middle here. And I've got a little twist going here. So we got one row here and 1 column here. And that is isolated within that cross, and it helps you easily count it. Now this is a fingering weight sweater, so we're actually seeing 2 rows in this slot and two rows and 2 columns, which is okay. That still makes it easier to count versus just holding a ruler out and trying to count along the ruler or something. This nicely isolates those stitches for you and helps you count that. So that's our swatch gauge tool. Very helpful. I use it quite often, especially now that I've started knitting sweaters and other garments for myself and for my kids. So very useful tool, very helpful. So everybody needs to be doing their swatches like we're supposed to, and this tool will help and make it hopefully a little bit easier. So with that, I'm going to get my pedestal out of the way. A tool that a lot of people like to see demoed is our Nasta pens. And Hillary, Hillary likes her Nasta pen. But this tool is, oh, there it is. Yep. She's got a beautiful cedar one too. I can tell by the color. This tool is wonderful. It's used for hand winding center pull balls of yarn. Maybe you're in a location where you can't put your ball winder up and swift up and stuff like that, or you don't have a place to hook your ball winder to. Maybe you're a passenger in a car and want to get winding done so you can start a project. You know, many reasons why to use this. I actually use the Nasta pen because I find it very relaxing to wind on a Nasta pen. A lot better than sitting there winding on a ball winder and wondering when the heck is this going to get done. You can sit down on your chase and kick out your feet and relax and wind your yarn. So I do use a Nasta pen quite a bit. I know Norleen loves to use her Nasta pen. I don't think there's a single car trip anymore that we do, Norleen and I do, that she's not winding a ball of yarn as we drive. I don't know if she's trying to relax by doing that because she doesn't like my driving, or if she just really wants to get that wound because, you know, she wants to start a project or something, or needs to change colors. Haven't quite decided yet. I'm afraid to ask because I'm afraid it's my driving. So to use the Nasta pen, all of our Nasta pens have a notch up here at the top, and this is where you're going to tie on your yarn or slip knot on your yarn. So you can hold your center pull string and to help you get started. We also have handles. The handles and the lengths of our Nasta pens vary. It really just depends on the board that they're made out of. How long is that board? How big is the square that we start with? That'll depend on how big the barrel of the Nasta pen is. The shape of the handle really depends, because these are all handmade and hand turned by my dad. The shapes of these really kind of depend on what he feels like when he starts turning these. You know, is he in a mood for a little bit bumpier handle? Is he, you know, does he want to do a little bit fatter handle? You know, all of these have a specifications. The barrel have a very slight taper to them that helps get the ball of yarn off of it when you're done. But there's certain things that we require within the Nasta pens, and the rest is up to creative, you know, his creativeness. We do these in different kinds of woods. If you saw the one that Hillary had, hers was an aromatic cedar, and that's why it was kind of red and white. This one here happens to be a beautiful walnut. We also do ones out of cherry. We've done some out of hickory, oak, red cedar, various different kinds of wood. It really just kind of depends on what's in the shop when we need to get more. So to show you how to use the Nasta pen, what we're going to do is we're going to create a slip knot, however it is you create your slip knots. And then I'm going to slip this loop over that edge. And now I've got the yarn attached to my Nasta pen. I'm going to hold this tail down to the Nasta pen. I'm actually going to take both strings. I'm going to hold it down the edge of the Nasta pen. You know what? Let me go to a white yarn for this. You'll see the white yarn against that walnut much better. So again, I'm making my slip knot. I'm putting the loop over the notch in the Nasta pen, and I'm just tightening that up. I'm holding both strings down on the Nasta pen. And then what I'm going to do is the one that goes to my skein that needs to be wound, this thread here, I'm going to start winding that around. I'm going to wind around just sideways like this for a little bit here. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a base. Now, I always liken this part here. If you've ever took the center out of a skein of yarn, like anything that's pre-skeined, like this is balled up, or a pre-skeined yarn, if you ever taken the center out and you get what I call the yarn barf, that big wad of yarn that comes out to begin with, that's what this is. This may turn out to be yarn barf. It may not, but you never know. So what we do is we get this base, and basically you can make this as wide or narrow as you want. This is going to be the base of the ball of yarn to how wide that ball is going to start out or narrow. So once we get a base started like this, I tend to put my finger over here just to keep that in its place. Not necessary. You guys are going to figure out what's the best way for you to use this. How does it work the best for you? So, got to take my poncho off because I'm getting warm. So I hold that down, and then what you're going to do is you're going to go at an angle. I like to go from top to bottom. That's just the way that it works the best for me. You can go from bottom to top. That'll work perfectly fine. It's just whatever works for you. I wind mine almost exactly opposite of what Norleen wraps hers. So if you ever watch Norleen do a demo of an Ostapen, as long as she starts it out, it'll be going the right way for her and she'll be working fine on it. If I start it out, it'll be backwards for her and you'll hear her complain. I also wind on a ball winder backwards from her too. So, interesting fact. In case you wanted to know, we may have that for trivia later. Never know. So I go from top to bottom, and again, I use my finger as a helper to kind of get started. This first part can be tricky. If you're just learning on an Ostapen, definitely use your fingers to help you out. It's not against the rules to use your fingers. So I'm using these to kind of help out, get started. I'm going at an angle from top to bottom. And when I do this, it slips around a little bit to start with, but you can see I'm getting a little bit better there. So what you want to do when you start wrapping in an angle, you want to go next to wood to next to wood. So next to wood at the top to next to wood at the bottom, if you're doing top to bottom. If you're doing bottom to top, then of course you're going to go next to wood at the bottom to next to the wood at the top. And what that does is that'll build your ball this way. So what we need to do is start from here, and we need to build it this way to get a good base on it. And while I start getting this base on it a little bit, I can tell you a little bit of history of the Ostapen. So a Ostapen, the translation of Ostapen, is nest egg. Why is it nest egg? Well, when you wind this, and you'll see this here in a little bit, when you wind this and you get started on it, your ball is actually going to look like an egg. It's going to be very much egg-shaped. There's a lot of people that look at that and say, oh my gosh, this doesn't look like a ball of yarn. What can I do? You know, oh, if you can see Hillary, I don't know if you can see her in the little pictures, but she's got the perfect egg there of yarn. And it works great. There's a lot of people that prefer to keep them egg-shaped. One is it's easier to wind when they're egg-shaped. You don't have to change how you're winding it all through the entire process. Another one is when you have an egg-shaped, your ball collapses down. So if I'm looking at this from the side, it's actually going to collapse down like this. So it's going to collapse on top of itself, and it's going to create less tangles. If you have a cake of yarn, the cake of yarn is going to collapse this way, and sometimes you can have issues with tangling, because as it collapses down and you're still trying to pull up through the top, it can tangle. Some people say eggs tangle less than the cakes do, but really it is a personal preference. I still wind mine often as cake shape, but again, that's just me and a little bit of my OCD wanting everything to look that way. So we're just going to continue building that base up, going next to wood to next to wood. And what I'm doing is I'm actually giving this just a slight turn each wrap I do. And you can see that I don't hold my Ostapen clear down on the handle. I choke up on it a little bit. That's just how it feels better in my hand. It gives me the best leverage on it. You do this however it's best for you. And you can see as I'm doing this, it's already starting to get that oblong look to it. And that oblong look is going to get much more pronounced the more and more we wrap on here. And we're just going to keep going for a little bit. Oh, you notice that slip down from my notch? That's okay. I'm just going to pull it up a little bit. Tighten that loop back up. That happens sometimes. That's okay. And you'll notice from time to time you get some that like to flip down and around. That's nothing that's going to hurt the functionality of your center pull ball. And my yarn that I'm pulling from doesn't want to unwind nicely, so it's, see, I've got my yarn both. There we go. So we'll just keep going a little bit here. Just keep it going next to wood to next to wood. At an angle across. It doesn't have to be a really steep angle, just whatever angle takes you next to wood, next to wood. Now, one thing, depending on how tight you want your balls wound, is that I tend to put more tension on it, so you can see that I just put a little bit of a stretch to the yarn. If you don't want that to it, you can put no stretch to the yarn. But I like mine a little bit snugger, so I do put that little bit of tension. How tight your ball is going to be will depend on how much tension you're putting on that as you wind. So, as we go like this, you can see that we started with a space about this big, and now we're up to here. So as you do this next to wood, you're growing your ball lengthwise, so top to bottom. And if you like the look of this, then you can keep going this way until you have all of it wound and you're ready to go. If you like yours more cake-like, like I do, then all there is a simple change to how you wrap this. So instead of going next to wood, we're going to go slightly lower, so you can see right here, slightly lower to slightly off the wood down at the bottom. So you're just changing the angle that you're winding just a little bit. Continue to twist as you wind. And you're going to see here as I do this, that this ball is going to change shape. Because what I'm doing is I'm growing it differently now. Just keep wrapping a little bit down from the edge to a little bit up from the edge, not next to wood anymore because we're making it more cake shape. And what we're doing, you can kind of see this now, is we're no longer growing it this way. We're now growing it this way. So this is what's going to give it the more cylindrical look versus the egg-shaped look. Now, I will tell you, are you going to be able to pick up your Nasta pen and start doing this right away? Probably not. If you can, congratulations. I envy you. This took me a lot of practice to get the cake shape in this, but I was determined to be able to wind this. It took a lot of time at looking at ball winders and how does this work. A lot of videos online. So as I do this a little bit more, you can see how that is becoming much more cylindrical shaped versus egg shaped. Now, if you get winding a lot of yarn on here, and all of a sudden you realize you have this really short cake and it's really wide this way and everything, you know, what you can do is you can just start going next to wood again a little bit, and that'll grow it up again, kind of egg shaped. You can see how that rounded that cylindrical shape out quite a bit just by a couple of rounds. Look, I have more of a ball now. Kind of makes me think of the New Year's Eve ball, the ball drop. So I don't know. I'm being weird. Sorry. The things after long days. So you can go next to wood to grow this way again. And then if you want to go back, you can just change the way you wind it, change that angle a little bit more. And all of a sudden, now you're doing it more cake shape again. So let's say we're at the end of our ball now. I'm going to take a little bit out of here and I'm going to break this yarn. Believe it or not, I wound a good portion of that ball I was doing in that little bit of time. So what I always like to do is I always like to take the last little bit and go around and make kind of a belly band. I know I'm not going to pull from the outside, so I do this. If you do want to pull from the outside, you definitely can. It's not saying you have to use these as center pull, but this is just how you do a center pull. So I make a belly band. I tuck my end under the belt. Tuck my end under. And then now you need to get it off your Nasta pen. And this is really easy. All you're going to do is you're going to take your loop off your notch up here. You're going to keep a hold of that loop, and then you're just going to slide that ball off. And then that loop, you pull that a little bit. There's my end of yarn. This is my center pull ball. Isn't that a cute little sucker? Easy peasy. So if you do like to go from the outside, you now have your yarn from the outside. You can just stuff this in the center and get it out of your way. If you're doing something that you need 2 strands for and you just have the one ball, you can pull from the outside and the inside. It works great. If you're a yarn spinner and you're taking your yarn off of your spindle or your bobbin and you want to, and it's a single and you want to two-ply it, but you want to two-ply it in the way that you use every ounce of that hand-spun yarn, which means two-plying it from a center pull ball. You can take your single, you can wrap it onto your Nasta pen, just like I wrapped this yarn, and then you go from the outside, or the inside and the outside, and you go to your spindle or your bob or your wheel, and you two-ply these together. And then when you're done, you use every ounce of your yarn. So you can not only use this for winding your yarn for knitting projects, but you can also use it for winding your singles when you get ready to ply, when you're yarn spinning, or many other things. You know, joke about these. My dad makes these. He can never remember that they're called Nasta pens, or he probably remembers, but the way he calls them knee knockers or tire thumpers. So it's kind of funny. You know, you can always use it for that too if you really want to, but it's too beautiful of a piece to be doing too much of that. But I was telling you a little bit about the Nasta pen too. Is not only does it mean nest egg, but kind of a cool history fact about the Nasta pen is that it is Norwegian, and in that area, at the time before all the fancy gadgets and gizmos came around and everything, Nasta pens were actually given from a prospective husband to his prospective future wife. And what it was is how intricately carved the Nasta pen was that he gave his betrothed would show her family how well he was going to be able to provide for their daughter. So if it was more intricately carved, he was a great craftsman. He was going to be able to provide well for their daughter, and he would be a good match for it. So kind of a cool thing there. You know, at that time and that age, Nasta pens were needed because they always handmade their clothes. It was something they needed to do, so they needed a way to wind it. And to get one from your betrothed was a special gift and a special tool for you to use. So that's the Nasta pen. Does anybody have any questions so far? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Does anyone have any questions? Anything at all? Or any thoughts on how maybe you could use some of these tools? Or any ahas? Does anyone have a pulse?
I used my Nasta pen this afternoon while watching an earlier presentation to wind the yarn that I'm using now. So it takes, I'm with Jen. It's very relaxing to use.
Yep.
And I agree. It's a great tool to have on the go. So that way you can, you know, you don't have to take a giant Swift or whatever with you. It fits nicely in a project bag. Sometimes, too, you never know when one of those balls is just going to everywhere too. So it makes a
Yeah,
nice
or if you wound one on a ball winder and you're getting close to the end and you want to use it for another project and you want to rewind it, works great for that because it's just a little bit. It doesn't have the size around that a ball winder. I mean, a lot of ball winders, their cone is about that big around. These work great for minis too. I love winding minis on an Ostapen.
Well, and also too tidying up some of the balls when you're done with it, like you're saying, you're done with your project too.
Yep.
Because that, I'll say one great storage thing too is to use the nitty knotty to find out how many yards are left in that leftover ball, whatever leftover yarn you have from your project, and then you could easily get off the Nostopen nitty knotty with the Nostopen and that put it back in the ball form if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So.
So does anybody want to see a new tool? Oh, did you have something?
Yes, new. Sorry.
New tool. Okay.
New. No, we're gonna need to see some enthusiasm. Don't show them yet, Jen. Enthusiasm, please.
No enthusiasm.
No tool.
Cindy.
So we've got this cool little thing, and this is for fiber, for spinning people or people that like to work with fiber to prep the yarn, or prep the wool fiber to get it to where you can spin it. This is a lock opener. So if you have locks of wool, like this thing here, that sucker's curly and it's tight. And if I was to put that on my blending board or a drum carder or hand carders, it wouldn't mix well. So you can use this tool to open this stuff up. And it's actually really kind of fun. My 12-year-old was in here right as I was setting stuff up, and he's like, I need to do this. Let me do it. So all you do is put your fiber on it, and then you give it just a little bit of a pull and kind of give it, that little one like to come out. So give a little bit of a pull, and you lift up on it. Do that a couple times, and look at how fluffy that became. So it opens up those tight locks for you so you can spin it. And then you can do the other side, quick little couple pulls. Now that's ready to put in your blending board or spin right into your fiber, put it as fun little bits. And again, you just put it on there and you pull a little bit and you give it a couple of flicks. So this is what we call our handheld flicker or lock opener. Let's try some pink ones. So the cool thing about this is, as you can see, it's smaller. You can hold it in your hand. And just trying to get, you can see how tight that is. Just trying to get a piece here to work with. It's smaller, can hold it in our hand. This one is our prototype, so we don't have it yet, but we are putting a hand strap on this, so you don't have to hold so tightly. You can just put your hand in the strap. So just give it a flick on there and kind of pull down and pull up at the same time, and those tines work to open up those locks. So you can see those fluffy bits. I love fluffy bits. Flip it over. Pop that one on there. That one's got a pretty hefty.
Jen, what TPI do you recommend for locks?
So it depends on what kind of locks you're using. Very good question, Kathleen. Is that we're actually going to offer these in 3 different TPIs. We're going to offer it in a 54 for those thicker, coarser wools like your Lincoln, your Teeswater is a little bit thicker sometimes. So those thicker, coarser wools. We're also going to offer a 90 for those medium wools, so more like a Rambouillet and stuff. And then we're also going to offer a 120. So if you get a very fine, like maybe some Surrey alpaca or a finer sheep wool, then we'll have a 120 so you can open up those locks without really damaging the wool too much. So here's a nice big bit, which will become really nice and fluffy. Again, just flip it on there.
Just need one in every size.
Yes. So depending on what you do for wool, like Kathleen, I know you do a lot of blending and you like to do blending. This is very handy, handheld size. It's gonna have a hand strap on it. Matter of fact, I just ordered the leather for that. They'll be here on Sunday. So this is our handheld opener. Now to kind of go with these, because if you got your locks open, so now you kind of want to blend it. So I'm going to show you guys another new tool. And these, we have one of these for a while, and we just got these in. I'm so excited. Look at this. We've got hand carders.
Woohoo! Sorry, puberty.
Lindsay's a little excited, can you tell? So we do curved back because when you're working with blending on a hand carder, it's easier ergonomically to work at an arch. It doesn't put as much strain on your hands and your arms. So we do curved back. We also do smaller sizes. A lot of hand carders are going to be like 8 inches wide. Ours is under 6, and they're about 4-inch working space from top to bottom. And a lot of this is because, at least for me, I have issues with my wrists and my forearms, and the larger ones are just too hard on it. Just, they get too heavy. They're a little bit harder to use and everything. So we do the smaller size for ease of use. Helps be a little bit better. So if you have slightly weaker hands like I do, or other people do, or maybe you have smaller hands and those bigger ones are just a little too much, these are a really good size for that. They still make a decent sized rolag, or cloud, whatever you want to call it, coming off of here. And to use these, I've got some fiber here that matches those locks I was opening up. You're just going to load, and you can use this for blending, for just carding to kind of straighten out fiber to use. And I'm just going to load a little bit on here, the pink. And then I'm going to load a little bit of yellow on here. And this should make a very interesting color as I blend it. So I'm going to actually use this to blend these colors together. And you're going to hold one face up like this. You're going to hold the other one face down. And as I kind of showed you before, is you're going to do a rocking motion with them. So I'm going to put my one that's pointing down to the end, and I'm going to rock and pull. And each time I'm just going to grab a little bit more and go a little bit further on to this one to grab more of those fibers. And as you rock and pull it, it brings those out. Now you can see, look at that. There's already some orange showing in there. Look at how that blends those colors. Isn't that freaking awesome? Sorry, again, I get excited about fluff. So I'm going to do the same thing. I now put this one in the other hand, so I just switched hands is all I did. I'm going to grab the tips, and I'm going to rock and pull. And if you grab too much, it's going to make it harder to pull, so just do little bits at a time. And now that one's empty, so I'm going to switch hands again. And you can do this as many times as you want. If you're trying to blend your fibers, you can do this as many times as you need to get those colors to blend the way you want them to. And I'm just going to keep grab and rock and pull. And I'm going to keep blending these. I'm going to do a few more passes here. But you can tell each pass, look at how much more of those colors are blending and how much more they look orangey versus pink and yellow. And I just put little bits on it. You can get more fiber onto one of these than what I am. And you rock and pull. And you can see now, yeah, you can still see some yellows and some pinks, but you also have that orange that's in there now. And that's the joy that it comes from blending these. And to take it off, you can just take the edges and kind of lay that down onto your other one. And I give it just a little bit of a tug depending on how it looks. And you can roll it up. Now look at that. I got a nice little cute rolag. All from just a couple of moments of work.
Look how pretty that is.
And look at the colors that came from. I mean, you would never know that you would get this from those
I
two
love it.
bright in your face colors.
That is so pretty.
So this is our hand carders. And again, for those people that do different weights of wool or different thicknesses of wool, we will be selling these in the same 3 TPIs, TPIs being tines per inch. We will have a 54 TPI for those coarser wools. We'll have a 90 TPI for the medium coarseness, and then we'll have a 120 TPI for those finer, the Angora, the Cashmere, the alpaca, all that really fine, wonderful fluff. So if you're doing this and you've opened up some of your locks too, you can put that right in here and blend those in to any fiber, or blend them together if you've got enough of them. Or just put a bunch of the same colors together and make your roll eggs for easier spinning. Lots of things you can do with hand carders. A great way to do simple little blends and everything. So these are wonderful tools. And these hand carders, some fun note about these hand carders, if you buy these hand carders, you're actually helping us recycle, believe it or not, because these hand carders are made out of recycled waterbed. So these are actually made out of a waterbed frame that, was used through, I think it was 3 different people, and finally got to the point that it was no longer wanted. So instead of throwing it out or burning it, Dad decided that it would be perfect for making the hand carders out of, and now we have curved back hand carders. Super exciting. So we're getting close to time here.
And I did put the link to the website in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. So I'm going to switch cameras here again and get back on camera.
So how many new things was that this evening?
That was 2 new things this evening.
You're holding out, aren't you?
What's that?
Holding out, aren't you?
I am. I've got 2 more to show you guys tomorrow during our live shop.
Ooh.
So if you guys come to our live shop tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern? I can't remember. What time is it?
Are you
It's
sure
right
about
after
that
the
one?
scavenger hunt. So come to the scavenger hunt and stay for our live shop.
Yes, at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yes, thank you.
And the scavenger hunt is at 7 p.m. Eastern.
So scavenger hunt, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's kind of our yearly thing. This will be the 3rd time we've hosted a scavenger hunt, and it's always fun. Everybody seems to have a blast. We've got prizes for the winning team. Not
I just put the
one
link in the
random
chat.
person. Perfect.
The scavenger hunt link, and I'm going to pull the other one too. Make sure
Yeah.
you RSVP to things. I have now gone and seen 8 different people because they either were not on the RSVP list or they're not on our mailing list. I still have Yarnsie giveaways to give away.
Oh no.
Yep. So make sure.
So yes, we got 2 more new products that we're going to show tomorrow during our live shop. One of them is another fiber item, and one of them is a knitting item. So just to kind of make you wonder there, you got to come to our shop to see what we have. Anybody have any questions of what I've showed you today? I mean, I know I went through several things.
And it looks like we're good. Thank you, Jen. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.